This is 160, CISM, and we've already been through 3 classes, so we're down to Information Risk Management, the first of several parts of Chapter 3, and you should turn in your topic. Your topic doesn't need to be more than a few words, just what you're going to write a paper and give a presentation about, just so I know you're starting to think about it. So here we are, and I think I see a comment over here about Spotify, but not surprisingly, pay a monthly fee, and artists get a commission. Yeah, that's right. I had the same feeling. People say, I don't quite understand how the money laundering works, but I haven't used Spotify. But anytime you pay for a service, there's an opportunity for money laundering. Maybe you can pay with dirty money, and then the person at the other end gets money, which is now clean. That's the idea. So somehow they're exploiting Spotify, although I agree, I don't quite know how that works. Anyway, let's take a look at this information risk management stuff. So we're going to do risk management concepts, and there's going to be more in part 2, part 3, and part 4. I broke this chapter up into a lot of little pieces because there's too much in here. So this is 30% of the CISM exam, a really big part. And so risk management is balancing business opportunities with information security losses, and this is the big problem. To make more money, you probably need to engage in risky activities, and so you have risk management to try to balance these things. Amateurs will do things like just try to ban risky activity, but that's typically not possible because the risky activity is there, you're considering it because it's a business opportunity. So if the effectiveness of your risk management depends on support for executive management, fitting into the culture, and each management program is different. I mentioned before, this is a lot like a doctor trying to give someone counsel about their health. You want to tell them to lose weight and diet and stop smoking and get exercise, and yet if you just are too pushy about it, they'll just leave and ignore everything you say. You have to influence people without being irritating or pushy, or they won't listen to you. So there's a lot of factors. The culture of the company is very high. Your mission, your management structure, what sector you're in matters a lot. For example, if you're in banking, it's very risk averse and it's government regulated, and there are all kinds of rules, whereas if you're a social network like Facebook, there's much less in the way of rules. Market conditions are extremely important. I was just listening to Scott Galloway today, and he said that the market conditions are probably more important than the actual quality of the company. There's just a time that's right for something, and there are times that are wrong for things. Then, of course, laws and regulations, your risk tolerance, and the financial health of the company all matters. So if you perform risk management correctly, then you will lower the probability of security incidents and have less impact from the ones that happen, and you'll get a culture of being risk-aware planning. This is the goal of risk management, to what extent you can do it. So here's the technologies you use: access government systems, we'll talk more about them, access management, anti-malware, cloud access security brokers are things that manage your cloud accounts and how you connect in. This is a big issue. A lot of people leave management accounts available for Amazon Web Services and such without understanding what powers they have, so hackers can hack into them. Application security testing tools, file activity monitoring, integrity monitoring to see if things like ransomware are doing bad things to your files, and firewalls, of course, monitoring network traffic and blocking malicious traffic. So the one term there I thought was worth defining is access governance. This is governing who has access to what in the organization. And so it's more than just access management, which is just a list of people allowed to get in. This means you have actually an organized governance program where you watch who's allowed to do what, and you have policies. 20 years ago, when I was a new teacher here, my students were using the Hills Unix server, and a bunch of my students kept having to get password resets. So I went down to them, and they just promoted me to an administrator over the system so I could do it. And at that time, I knew like 2 Unix commands. I was completely unqualified to be a Linux administrator, but that's what they did, and that's a lack of governance. I mean, governance should mean you actually have rules, who's allowed to have permissions and who's not, and some good reason for it. So you can't just arbitrarily promote someone for convenience like that. So other technologies, forensic tools to get evidence from systems, governance, risk, and compliance systems, we'll talk more about them in a minute, intrusion detection and prevention systems, scan network traffic and look for malicious traffic, and network access controls limit who can connect. Phishing controls, public key infrastructure is for your HTTPS certificates, and SIEM systems like Splunk or QRadar are very important. They're a more fancier form of intrusion detection system that analyzes not only network traffic but also logs and other data to detect intrusions. Single sign-on systems are a big issue. Every company now uses many different services. You have an email service, you have a VPN, you have file servers, you got a SharePoint portal, you've got cloud services like Dropbox and everything, and you don't want to make your employees log in with like 10 different passwords all day, so you set up federated identity management where they can log in once and that identity is propagated to other systems. That's single sign-on, and that means that there is some kind of token that means you've already logged in that is sent over the network to various systems, and if people can steal or forge that token, then they can break in to accounts. So it's intrinsically risky, but it's essentially necessary for the modern complicated networks where there are many servers working together. And then there's static application security testing tools are testing tools that examine source code without running it. Dynamic tools, like Invicti, send traffic to the running application to see if it has flaws. I see some more comments going here. Okay, what is the risk appetite? A risk appetite is how much risk you want to take at your company. Some companies have for example, banks usually have a very low risk appetite. They're not willing to take any risky activities, whereas Facebook is famously very happy to take risks. They want to move fast and break things. All right. For governance, how do we enforce people are following? Well, that's part of the governance. You have rules and you have controls and you have punishment, like HR. You can be fined or demoted or fired, that sort of thing. All those things, how it's enforced is part of the governance system. I know how to militarize wormholes. Well, that's not on topic. Okay. So anyway, all right. And so GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, is a strategy to manage an organization's overall governance. So this is going to be governance, which is controlling what happens in your company and measuring the effectiveness. And then risk management, we've talked about, planning, considering how risky things are and figuring out how to lower the risks that are worth lowering, and compliance with regulations. So these are three things that work together, and you get a tool. These three processes align your IT with business objectives. There's spam filters to stop email spam, and you can have third-party risk management systems to try to deal with the consequences of your third-party brokers. Now, user behavioral analytic systems are a fairly new thing that mainly came out because of Snowden. Snowden was a trusted contractor for the NSA, and then he leaked all the secrets. And after that, every company and every military said, how do we know if some of our employees are becoming disloyal and they're going to betray us and leak the secrets? So they started to invent these systems to try to detect who is disloyal. Now, the NSA took everyone with access to a network and made them take a polygraph test every 3 months. That's the military solution, but companies typically don't believe in polygraphs. It's pretty much just the military that believes in them. But these user behavioral analytic systems try to find out if you're doing suspicious things for your behavior, something like spending more time playing games or something like that. I don't know how well they work, but it's that's one use of these things. Then unified threat management systems, we'll talk about in a minute. VPNs, of course, are a way for people to connect remotely with more security. And vuln scanning tools find vulnerabilities on websites and software, and web application scanning tools are essentially the same thing. Web filtering with web application firewalls, just another way of filtering network traffic to specifically remove web attacks. And your wireless controls limit who has access to your wireless network. And you can have external monitoring and intelligence services, external tools to monitor what's happening at your company, and external intelligence services are quite common. You subscribe to threat feeds where you get an automatic update of, say, malicious websites so you can block them at your proxy server. So here's UBA, behavioral analytics. User behavioral analytics. So here's what it is. This is going to detect insider threats, target attacks, and financial fraud. So it's going to try to detect suspicious activity on your network, looking at patterns of human behavior. This is something that's been around for a long time. there was a company called HP Gary that made a branch called HP Gary Federal in the early days of Twitter, like around 2011. They claimed that they could analyze tweets and analyze Facebook posts and figure out who was a criminal and who was in their gang. And they tried to sell this service to the government, and it turned out that they claimed they were going to find out who was in anonymous hacking websites at the time, and they were all wrong. So it was pretty much a disaster, that company. But that's that was an early version of this, where you somehow look at what people do and analyze it and determine which people are doing bad things. I don't know how well it works, but the tools do exist. I haven't seen studies of how effective they are. Let's see, why compliance personnel also focus on news that are related to the company they work in? Compliance people, I guess. Now, compliance people typically only think about the regulations that limit their company, sort of like taxes. However, focusing on news about your sector is important, and that would be in this category here of intelligence services. A lot of people do subscribe to reports from like Gartner and such, and like a Info Security is a website, and there's a banking security website. So I mean, you often follow the news about your business sector to find out what kind of attacks are happening and what kind of threat actors there are there. So it is common that you get information about that company. All right. Anyway, so all right, and here Unified Threat Management is down here. And these are next generation firewalls. So it's a device that gives you many security features, antivirus, anti-spam, content filtering, and web filtering. The modern advanced kind of firewall. So let's try Kahoot. Should be here, 3A1. All right. Ah, 4-digit PIN. In where, the UK? Oh, well. Wow, I'm surprised. What are they going to use? Android? As if that's any better? Yeah, but I mean, if you did an analysis, you would find the iPhone is the most secure. That's why banning Android would make more sense than banning iPhones. But they're spying on you more if you use an Android, I think. That's why, I know that the president is not allowed to use a BlackBerry. They have to use a special hardened device, but I don't think the government wants to provide that for all the government workers. So if they're going to use normal consumer devices, I think the iPhone would still be your best choice. But anyway, it'd be interesting to see what people are doing. What's that? Well, yeah, Russia would ban it. Well, we're practically at war with Russia, so that makes sense. Russia would probably like to ban basically all American tech. They can't get it anyway. It's all embargoed. What's what? Oh, sure, they could get, yeah. But it makes sense. I mean, we ban Russian antivirus and they ban American tech. That's pretty logical. That's right. Kaspersky. Yeah, but we had a huge security incident caused by Kaspersky. It created a huge scandal. So their name is blackened, even though they're trying to avoid it. Anyway, let's try this Kahoot. It was that worm that infected the hospitals was caused by Kaspersky. So which one of these items will ensure compliance with regulations? GRC solutions, the C in there is compliance. All right. And which one of these will detect insider threats, which is a big scary thing? Most problems are caused by your own employees doing the wrong thing, not by external attacks. However, most of it is just honest mistakes. But when your employees turn evil and turn against you, then you really have a problem because they have passwords, they have keys, they have access to your stuff. So this is a big problem people worry about a lot. What do you do if one of your own employees goes bad?
The latest trend is people use like AI generated image for job interview. So once they get hired, they get everything.
Yes, that's, and especially for remote jobs.
False ID, so the company cannot track anyway.
Yes, that's right. I've heard of that, and I've heard a lot of them are North Koreans posting for jobs with fake AI-generated personas.
So
but there's a lot of other people.
They get the password, they get everything.
That's right. That's another way. Getting hired, then you're an insider. Absolutely. All right. So which one will detect suspicious network activity? Intrusion detection system. All right. And which one is vulnerable to pass-to-hash attacks? That's single sign-on. So let me get the winners, and then I see a couple of questions to discuss. Sean L. All right. All right, good. All right. And there were a couple of comments in the Twitch. Here, least privilege for insider threats. Yes, least privilege is one of the controls against that, but a bigger control is separation of duties, because least privilege means you don't give people permissions more than what they need to have. So that prevents people from, prevents your sales staff from writing checks because they're not in the financial department, but it doesn't stop your finance staff from writing bad checks. That would be two-person controls. Separation of duties, where two people have to work together to do something. And someone says, if you make some app that prevents them sharing data, well, that would be nice, like an ad blocker, to prevent the data from leaving. But of course, Apple will not give you that app because they want the data. And on an iPhone, you won't be able to put it there. This is just like ad blockers. The company that sells you the device wants to spy on you, and they will not let you prevent that. So it's a fundamental problem there. Is CCSF going to try CPTC? I think so, but that's up to Elizabeth. And you saw there's a sign-up form on my page. So I think so, but it's not my call. All right, let's go back to here. Good, we're on track. So when you purchase things, you can decide what you want to buy. If you have risk management, you consider the risks and choose what to buy and choose what to do for that. Without risk management, you just get pressure from salespeople imitating other companies and just articles the CEO sees in magazines and sort of buy things at random. This is part of a security culture becoming more mature. You actually think about the security consequences of things instead of just buying whatever seems fashionable at the time. So risk tolerance, we talked about before, risk appetite, how risky are the decisions you're going to allow at your company. And this is executive management. And this will consider the organization's ability to absorb losses and regulatory and legal requirements. So like I keep mentioning, a company like Facebook has a very high risk tolerance because they really don't have any consequences if they get hacked and some people get in, they can deal with it. Whereas companies like hospitals and airports and military bases have a much lower risk appetite because the consequences of a breach are much more severe. So you have relationships. Your IT and security typically start out as a hostile group that holds back progress. If your IT is not responsive, people will go to shadow IT that will just start leasing Amazon servers and using them for business, and then you're losing control. And the same thing happens to security. If your security regulations are so onerous that people can't get their work done, they will break the rules and sneak around it. So you have to become a business enabler where you help people accomplish their business goals, but you guide them into a safer way to doing it. So stakeholders need to communicate. Everyone needs to understand what risk management is and how it's going to impact their autonomy. And so you have to explain to people that doing things the secure way will improve the organization and make the company more successful and make them more likely to be able to keep their job instead of them just seeing you as an obstacle they have to get around. Security awareness is typically give the whole company training. This is what Kevin Mitnick did. He just recently died, but that was his thing. He was a famous hacker in the 90s and 80s, and then he came out and became a security awareness trainer, and a very popular one. So risk awareness can also be given to senior personnel, helping them understand that their decisions have risk and that they should have a risk management program, and explain to them how they go through that program to try to make less risky decisions. Let me check and see if there are more questions coming in on Twitch. Is there more information on the topic 1? Yes, all you have to do is submit a few words describing what topic you're going to write a paper and give a presentation on. That's what it is. All right. Just to make sure you're thinking about your paper and presentation that's coming up. And you can choose any security topic you like. All right, so risk consulting. This is what happens inside your company. If it works well, your risk security managers will be like a consultant where they call you in, we're opening a new location, we're launching a new product, and you can trust them to help you do it in a more secure way. This is the end goal of building good relationships. They trust you enough to you find out about things and you can help guide them and make them more secure. All right, so the main attribute is the ability to listen to people and then assess the impact and find ways to further the business goals, which is more than just technology. So there are risk management frameworks, of course. These we talked about before. ISO 27000 has got a series of them. There's one here that's got the structure of an information security management system. And then there's one here, information security risk management down here, and here's risk management and risk assessment techniques. There's a few of the ways in the huge 27,000 family. Then NIST for the US government, they've got the risk management framework as one of the NIST special publication 800s, and another one for information security risk. COBIT, of course, has it. There's one called RIMS, Risk Maturity Model, and a facilitated risk assessment process. These are some of the many frameworks that exist to guide your company into this stuff. The components always are like this. You have the scope of the program, which is what part of the business is covered by it, then objectives, policy, your risk appetite, roles and responsibilities of the people, then a life cycle where you make policy decisions, you implement controls, you measure to see how well the controls worked, and then you come back in a cycle, improving things. Documentation and management review are always parts of it. So, and then you can purchase GRC systems that you install to help you do this, like from RSA, Logic Manager, and Risk Connect. These are the software products you buy, and they just help your company achieve these, just like you have special software products to do taxes and other things you have to do in your business. All right, let me take a look and see if there are more questions here. Like the HIPAA regulation. Yeah, HIPAA regulation is one for compliance, yeah. All right, so you have used a platform to manage your policies and your external vendors, and hopefully that'll help you organize all this. Blizzard of paper and documents going back and forth. So your risk management program might only have a small scope in part of the business, or the entire organization, depending on what you're doing. And you have internal environments, not just your relationships with external entities like suppliers and government agencies, but internally, you've got parts of your company that are doing things, and risk practices inside your company, and communication protocols and relationships inside the company as one part helps another. Microsoft very much takes parts of their company and they treat them as consultants that are actually hired by another part of the company to do something and paid by the hour. So they choose to implement internal processes like they implement external processes. That's one way to do it. Then there's external environments, things that come from outside that affect your company, like market and economic conditions, laws, external stakeholders like suppliers and customers, and threat actors, and geopolitical factors. These are all the things that come in from outside that affect the level of risk in what you do. And so then you can define gap analyses. We mentioned this before. So whenever you are trying to achieve some security goal, you have an existing state, and then you have some desired future state. That's the gap, the difference between where you are and where you want to be. So for example, if you have a change control process, if you have a company and currently they have a log of changes and just a bunch of emails, it's management, where management approves things, that's the current system, and it'd be better to have a change request procedure, a change advisory board, clear roles and responsibilities, and more details in the log so you have a more complete record of changes that were made, who approved them, and why they were made. This is a step forward to have a better change control process. So every security manager is not perfect. Nobody has all the information they need or all the skills they need. So this is important. Don't pretend. This is one of the fundamental ethical guidelines of certified workers like CISSPs and CISMs, is you don't try to do things you're not competent to do. So you have to have other people that can help you. You may not know enough about risk management or the tools or technology or something, so you have to get help from outside. There are a lot of sources of information too to keep up on things. There's a lot of organizations like ISACA and ISC Squared and many others, Cloud Security Alliance. InfraGard is the public-private partnership with the FBI. There's an International Association of Privacy Professionals. And there are information sources. There's a bunch of published practices, and they're very important to follow the news. We were talking about this earlier. There's many sources of news. Risky Biz is a popular podcast, Pulse Security Weekly. There are many others. And what you do is you find a news source that you like that covers the area that matters to you, and you have to stay informed. There's also research organizations out there that give detailed research of different industry sectors. And there's advisory services like Gartner that are sort of consultants that will recommend things. Gartner in particular is always guiding you what's worth investing in. They rate with different technologies and how likely they are to grow. And they rate companies. They have a famous chart with, I think it's ability to execute and completeness of vision are the two scores, where a company is rated on these scores, and there lets people decide how much that company is likely to survive and whether their stock is likely to go up. We check for comments here. How do we calculate the maturity of an area or department in compliance? In general, the way you rate maturity is by measuring some well-defined number having to do with things. So in compliance, I would think it would be your degree of compliance. How are you in compliance? How quickly do you fix problems? But there may be something in those frameworks that's more detailed about how to rate the maturity. I don't know exactly what you use, particularly for compliance. Then, of course, there's consulting firms, training and books out there. Here's a cybersecurity canon is from Palo Alto Network. Is a list of famous books. I use a lot of these in my classes. There's a bunch of books that are established as the well-trusted, important books in cybersecurity. And then conferences, of course, like DEF CON and Black Hat and RSA, where you can always find the latest information if you like going to conferences. And then there are security intelligence services that I mentioned. You can subscribe to these things like IBM X-Force and many others. You subscribe to a service which then delivers machine-readable content about current threats and dangers, which you feed into something like your SIEM system to protect you automatically from them. You can also outsource it in simple ways by getting, for example, OpenDNS. If you use OpenDNS servers, they automatically update all the malicious websites, and they'll block your employees from reaching those malicious websites. So that's another way to do it. All right, let's take a look at another Kahoot. If I can get there, all right. 3A2 is here. All right. Playing with the music a bit. Well, I'll give it a few more seconds. Looks like half the people fell asleep. This is life. Yeah, put a lot more of that. Look over here and see if they're active. I'll put it in the Twitch chat. It's on my homepage, but I'll put it in the Twitch chat after the lecture. Better wait a bit more. People are still coming in. All right. All right, so what did Kevin Mitnick provide to people? He did security awareness training. What is risk management for? It's not to prevent risky activities. That's the mistake where you just block things. It's to improve the business. You are part of making the business succeed, which doesn't necessarily mean avoiding risky activities. It means carefully choosing ones where the reward is worth the risk. All right, which one requires relationships of trust? Consulting is the best answer. You could say there's some trust in some of these others too, but you really have to trust consultants. You will not bother bringing in someone for a consultation unless you trust them. All right, and what's the most important consideration when choosing a GRC platform? getting into the culture is the most important thing. You're going to have everybody filling out forms and entering data into this thing and submitting reports and all that. And you somehow have to make it fit into the culture so people don't see it as a huge waste of their time and a burden, which is difficult, but that's what you have to do. Steph.